Welcome everybody to the Networking for Elite Athletes. Thank you for taking the time to log into the webinar if you're doing it live, or to watch it at another time if you are watching it. This webinar is a part of a program that the Griffith Sports College is running, designed to support our elite athletes as they prepare to transition from study and degrees at Griffith to life after Griffith, and that program is called the Graduate Ready program, and I would encourage you all to get on the website and have a look at that program and some of the opportunities that will be there for our elite athletes as a part of that. But as I said, today we are doing the Networking for Elite Athletes, and I'd just like to introduce today Nina Perry, who is a career and development consultant with Griffith Careers and Employment Services. Nina, thank you very much for joining us today. Nina is going to go through probably the first half an hour with some slides around, I guess, the theory of networking, and then we're really lucky to have a couple of former elite athletes in Mark Knowles and Duncan Free, who will be sort of applying that theory to their experience as an elite athlete, and also some opportunities that elite athletes get to network. So Nina, welcome and thanks very much.
Thanks, Naomi. Thank you so much for having me here today to present. It's wonderful to be here. I just wanted to check in on our slides. I'm just waiting for our slides to come up. Wonderful. So if you are sitting here with us today, if you're able to go to the Q&A function, please feel free to pop any comments in there, especially if you, if you can see our slides and we're good to go. If you could just, you're happy to pop a little comment into that chat function just to let you know it's all working from your end would be wonderful. And we will commence. So yes, hello, my name is Nina Perry. I am a development consultant with the Careers and Employment Service. I'm actually based on the Gold Coast campus. I would normally be in my office at the bottom of G33, but as you can probably see, I am working from home at the moment. So we're looking forward to being back on campus shortly. I wanted to, before I start, I really wanted to just highlight to you that we are a service here for all Griffith students. We are well hidden. Not a lot of students actually know about us, we find. So I'm so delighted to be in front of you today to say we are a service available to you. Our objective as part of the career service is to build employability of all Griffith students. So what that means is to be able to help you engage in the process of managing and building your career, building your employability as you go through your degree, and just supporting you through that whole process. We also do a range of job application processes. We can help with interview process, we can help with resumes, all of those lots of fun applied things as well. So thank you for joining us, and please, if you ever need our services, please engage with us as a team. We are here to support you. Okay, so today I want to offer some ideas about networking and how valuable it is for any student and any professional. You will use these skills throughout the rest of your life. And as I mentioned, please jump in if you have any questions. Thank you so much, Grayson. I can see your comment in there that you can see the slides, so that's wonderful. So Katie, if you wouldn't mind popping onto the next slide for me. Thank you. So before we start, here is a question for you to consider. I would like to know, what was the last thing you did to enhance your professional network? And what does the concept of professional networking mean to you? Just something to sort of start to think about to get those juices flowing. I really think, and as I work in this area of career development, networking means a lot of different things to different people. Often the first thing that people think about is what is represented in this photo in front of you. Crowded rooms, name badges, a few drinks thrown in, people having awkward conversations. Yes, sometimes this is the context we will find ourselves in, but of course networking is so much more than just sharing a wine and having a chat. Actually, in fact, as a career development professional, this kind of image, it throws chills up and down my spine, because I really don't love to engage in a lot of just meaningless small talk when I go to these events. So I want to offer a definition as to what we classify networking to be. So next slide, please. Here we go. So often confused with selling, networking is actually about building long-term relationships and a good reputation over time. So as that definition states, creating a group of acquaintances and associates and keeping it active through regular communication for mutual benefit. Now, the word I absolutely love in this definition is mutual. I think really that is the key to building a good professional network. It's about give and take. It's about offering something to someone else and getting help in return. That's a really simple definition of networking. And I think any networking conversation that we have with people, we need to go in with the intention of thinking, how can I give back, as much as how can someone else help me along my professional path as well. I wanted to really stress here too that networking is a learnable skill. I don't really think that we're all born networkers. You know, some people are really good at networking and some people just won't ever be. I really do think that it's a learnable skill, and it's a skill we really do need to embrace. And I think even in this post-COVID, when we get there to the post-COVID-19 job market, it's going to be a skill that we need even more than ever. And I often hear people say to me, students often say, look, I don't want to network because I'm an introvert. I just can't network. But did you know, here is an interesting fact from research that introverts actually make better networkers than extroverts. This is generally because introverts listen really well. They listen for stories. They listen for really good stories, and they have really good questions. If you are an introvert and you don't really like the idea of putting yourself out there, I just wanted to arm you with that fact that you're actually probably going to be really good at it because of your ability in those areas. Next slide, thank you. So here we go. What I wanted to present to you is to step away from that idea of that networking is just sort of having chats while holding a glass of wine. I want to bring the idea to you today that there are 3 types of networking that you may want to embrace over the course of your career and for different reasons. So some of these might apply as you step through into graduation, some might apply halfway through your career and even beyond. I'm going to briefly describe these 3 and give you an actionable step that you can take to implement them. So first of all, it's about building relationships and creating opportunity. So that's one goal for networking. So this might apply to speaking to future sponsors. It might be just looking for future work, or it might be a really active component of your job search technique. Secondly, I use networking to gain information. So maybe you want to learn more from someone who's been 3 steps ahead of you on the path where you are going. It could just be professionals in another industry altogether, but gaining information is a great goal to have for networking. And thirdly, also developing your reputation and brand. So this might even start to apply itself more to even e-networking, so networking online, virtually, but it definitely can be applied to in-person meetings as well. Okay, so let's dive into it with our next slide. Thank you. I have to say, out of all the job search techniques, networking is the most critical when it comes to finding new opportunities and gaining employment. Please trust me on this. And this image is why. It's estimated that only 20% of positions ever hit the open job market, or sit in the open job market, I should say. So they're the ones that are advertised on Seek, on job boards, LinkedIn, whatever it might be. So we do call that the open job market. However, employers, where possible, prefer to operate in the hidden job market. So we think about 80% of jobs lie in this area. So employers love to hire known quantities. Why? Because they know about you, they know about your reputation, they know about your skills. And it saves them time, it saves them money. So if they can hire a known quantity, someone who is sitting there, it makes their job a lot easier. A really, really quick example from my own life. So In my previous life, before I studied psychology and career psychology, I actually worked in the business sector. So I studied a Bachelor of Business at Griffith University. I was featured, my major was marketing, and I went and I worked for AMP Capital, and we were part of the network, the marketing team that marketed large shopping centres. So I was on one of my first days on my job in my graduate position, I had to go and meet every owner within the community of our shopping centre, and I had to work out how to market their businesses. I met a very prickly person, I will have to say. Her name was Kristen. She was quite difficult to work with, but I stuck at it, and we ended up coming up with a pretty good marketing campaign for her business. So about 8 months later, I got a call randomly from someone at a competitor. So they asked me in for just a conversation about my career, and I sat down with them and they offered me a position. So it was a position that was a lot more money and a lot bigger position. So at the end of that conversation, I did say to them, look, if you don't mind me asking, how do you know about me? And that centre manager turned to me and said, my wife's name is Kristen, and you have done a lot of work with her, and she has just recommended me to you to me. So that's an example from my own life about how valuable networking is. Even if you don't know you're doing it at the time, it's your reputation. It's who knows you and who knows about your work. So that really underpins networking as well. Every job that I have got since my graduation has been through my network. So it means it cuts down a lot of time interviewing and things like that, but really is the way that most people operate now as they move on from their graduate positions. Another example from our current COVID-19 environment has been Coles. Coles had 55,000 applications when they looked for people to join Coles to help them with their current environment. To cut the time down, they went straight to people who worked at Coles, and they employed 2,500 people through their family and friends campaign. So those people got shortlisted straight away and into a position with Coles. So I know that might not apply to any of us here today in the type of jobs that we're looking for, but I think it's two really strong examples of how important your network is. So there is no other way to tap into this hidden job market other than reaching out to people and building relationships. So really, what does this entail? Next slide, thank you. In the hidden job market, it's very unlikely that the role that you really want is going to sit within your first or second degree of contacts. So what I mean by that are the people who are in your immediate environment. So it's great to know them and they will be very helpful, but generally we need to reach out to our third, fourth, fifth, sixth area of contacts, and that is through our first and second. So these people are gateways to opportunities. So to put that in, I guess, everyday talk, say if you have a coach, it would be the coach having a sister who has a brother, who has a next door neighbour, whose uncle is in the hiring position of the job you want. I see it happen all the time with Griffith students. So it's taking the time to slowly reach out to all those people in those links in the chain, so to speak. The job search networking, it really does need to be focused and it needs to be a prescriptive execution. The reason I talk about this with students is that often they say to me, I will be in front of people and I've got no idea what to say. I've got no idea how to reach out to them and ask them for extra contacts into those second and third levels of contacts. So I'm going to show you an example in a second of how to do that. But I wanted to remind you too, with your job search networking, it needs to be very goal oriented. So you need to be thinking about, what is my career objective? What is my career goal? Doing some reflection in that space to work out who it is you need to be talking to and who you need to meet. Setting goals in that area is very helpful. And thank you so much. For the next slide, we will get into a script. So here is a suggested script that I always arm my students with. The script includes your first level contact. So for example, a first level contact might be John Roberts. You're reaching out to someone in John Roberts' network and asking them to set up an interview. So here is how it goes. Your first line is, John Roberts suggested I give you a call. So you're highlighting your mutual acquaintance. I recently graduated with a Bachelor of Commerce and I have a strong interest in forensic accounting. So that is giving them the reason why you're ringing straight away early on in the conversation. Then we put John into it and say, John thought you might be prepared to give me 20 minutes of your time for advice on how I can break into this market. Would you be free Tuesday or Thursday afternoon next week? So there you go. It is very prescriptive, but if you can the script going into these conversations, you feel much more relaxed and you can get the conversation flowing quickly and easily. Okay. So, and yes, I just wanted to address, Grayson, your question there. Yes, absolutely, there's going to be a recording. Yeah, thanks, Naomi. Okay, on to our next slide. Thank you. So what happens if you think to yourself, look, I haven't necessarily got a secure career goal at the moment. I haven't really crafted my career objective, and I often hear this a lot as well. I just want to work out what my options are with my degree. You know, where am I, what can I be doing with this? So this is a second way to use networking, and we call it informational networking. It's also known as informational interviews. You may have heard of these before. Informational interviews are well used to build clarity around your career direction. So it's reaching out to people within your network and saying, do you know anyone who works in this particular area? I'm really interested in knowing more about what they do. A quick story from my own life. I was trying to decide whether to go down a clinical psychology pathway or a career psychology pathway. And so I set myself up with an interview with a clinical psychologist. And I sat down and said, what do you love about your job? What don't you love about your job? This built a lot of clarity for me around my next steps. It also really helps you build commercial awareness and industry insight, because when you're having those conversations with people, they might just start to talk about where they see the future of the industry going, or what they can see the changes are on the horizon, which you might think to yourself, that's exactly where I could fit in with my career. It does lead to establishing really beneficial first and second tier contacts. And it does, by chance, it can also help you tap into a hidden job market. So at the end of my informational interview, I was offered a position with that person. I didn't take it because it wasn't the direction for me, but I was able to say to that person, I do know someone in my network who would be great for you. So I helped to pay back in that sense. So as a tip, if we just go to the next slide, what are some questions that you could ask people if you really wanted to reach out and start to gather more information about your career direction? So things like, you know, what advice would you have for someone contemplating this field? And the one that I used, what is the best and worst thing about your occupation? What are the current opportunities in this field? So hopefully these slides will come in handy a little bit later on down the track, where you can start to reflect on these questions and think, that's exactly what I want to know when it comes to how I can get clarity about where I want to go. I love that idea too about how do you get the foot in the door in this field? That's a really great question to ask as well. So thank you. For the next slide. So our third type, and this is one that we don't often think about, but is still really important when it comes to networking, is starting to think about building your brand. Now, what is a personal brand? It can be a bit of an elusive concept for a lot of us. In your circumstances too, it might be insofar as you have a very well-known brand when it comes to your athletic side, so your sporting side, but you may be starting to think, do I need to be building a brand that's a parallel professional brand? So when someone thinks of me, they think of my sporting area of life, but they might also think of me about my professional side of life and how I can transfer my sporting skills and my abilities to a professional context. So one way that we need to start to build our brand is to think about our values and what drives us. We live in a narrative culture, so people naturally gel to stories, and they naturally gel to unique stories that highlight values of what drives you as far as your motivation goes. So taking a moment to reflect on your professional values, what do you want from your working life? What would make your working life really satisfying? How can you use your values and your working life to help others? These are the sort of things of questions that I would love for you to start to answer before you branch out into brand networking and building your brand. Once you have those down pat, and there's also a lot of, I just have to quickly say, a lot of assessments in this area. Reach out to me if you need any help with any of those. Once you have those and you've got some really good language around your values and what is driving you, it's then up to you to start to deliver that. How can you deliver it consistently too, across all communication channels? And by that I mean, how are you going to communicate that virtually across, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, if you use that, all of those sort of social networking platforms. How are you going to deliver that in person? If you are all of a sudden at a sponsorship event, for example, or you might be meeting with someone from industry and they turn to you and say, tell me a little bit about yourself. I also hear that you're studying this. Where do you hope to take that? I want to arm you with a really good way to pitch yourself. I think it's really important that we have that professional story down pat. So we're going to cover that just in a second. But before we do that, I just wanted to remind you that it's also really important to show up often where possible, to have your brand in the marketplace, and using that for brand alignment opportunities. So thinking about, what companies also have similar values to you, and is there a way that you would be happy to align yourself with those companies? Are there opportunities there? But let's get to that tactical bit that I just mentioned on our next slide, please. Here we go. So this is an elevator pitch example. I know it sounds a bit corny. Often when I say to students, talking about yourself in sort of 3 sentences or less, it can be quite tricky. So to arm you with a method of how to do that might be helpful. So typically our elevator pitch includes 4 elements. Generally, what value we hold dear to us. So that was what I was talking about before, what underpins your motivation. What is driving you towards what target, and who do you want to help and why? So here is one example from my own life. So my belief that all individuals have unique strengths and abilities that need to be contributed to the world of work. This drives my career coaching practice. I support women who juggle complex career development needs and help them create satisfying and purposeful working lives. So if I was at a typical networking event, I would use that statement to reflect what drives me professionally, and hopefully they can see, what my values are and where I want to take my professional future. Okay, so there's a little framework for you. Once again, reach out for support in any way if you need help with crafting your elevator pitch. Thank you. Next slide, please. So here we have the moment where we can pause, and if you're listening to this later on, you can press the pause button and think to yourself, okay, opportunities are definitely attached to people. It's not just a blank thing, not a blank thing, but an advertisement that you might see on Seek. That's just the end component. Really, any job opportunity is always attached to a person. So who is in your network right now? If you had to think about your first tier contacts, your second tier contacts, who would you write down on that list? That's just a little thought for you at this point. Okay, thank you. And to the next slide. So recapping, what is underpinning successful networking? So I wanted to reiterate, it's all about time. It really takes time to build trust and respect. So if you can start early, that is wonderful. You don't need to be rushing out and meeting 100 people overnight and connecting with 100 different people all at once. It's all about quality over quantity. So thinking about who you want to reach out to, who could possibly be very helpful for you in your career and why, how do they align with your goals, with your objectives, with your values. Making sure that you're using excellent communication skills as you do that. So either using the written word or your ability to communicate and hold a conversation. So practicing that before you enter into networking events is very important. Remembering that it's a two-way street. Don't forget, you have things to offer people just as much as you would hope to engage people in helping you as well. So using that as that mutual benefit is really key. And yes, building contacts slowly. So starting with your first and working out from there. I've just got one more slide to cover with you before we move on to. This is a really important slide that I'm quite passionate about, and we call it e-networking. So as you know, we all have a digital footprint, whether we like it or not. I would prefer not to have one, but you know, it is out there and we have to embrace it, and we have to own our story on the World Wide Web, because 91% of employers will Google you. So thinking about what happens when someone does Google your name, do you want there to be your sporting achievements, but do you also want a professional presence online as well to start carving out your professional work future? If you want to do that, I do suggest LinkedIn is a fabulous place to build that. We have algorithms behind LinkedIn that if someone does Google your name, it will present that as one of the first search options or search returns when someone Googles you. So owning your LinkedIn presence is really important. Thinking to yourself, what is online about me? Does it align with my values? Does it align with my professional presence? That extends even to your email address, your mobile phone message if someone goes to ring you. All of those things align with e-networking and your personal presence online. So I just wanted to leave you with that sort of last comment as well. That's not just that face-to-face contact, it's what's available online about you as well. Okay, so thank you. I think my last slide is more about just talking about it as it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You will have your network for life. So think about that going in as well and building that over time. I am going to hand back over to Naomi. So thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, please feel free to jump those straight into the Q&A box now. Otherwise, I'm going to be here for the rest of the session as well. Thanks, Naomi.
Thanks very much, Nina. That was great. A couple of really good tips there, and we're just going to explore those a little bit more now, and particularly as they directly relate to opportunities that elite athletes often have access to in networking. But just before we start that, I'm just going to introduce the people that we're going to have that discussion with. Firstly, somebody that probably a number of you know already, Duncan Free. He's a director of the Griffith Sports College, a graduate of Griffith as well in health science. Duncan was a rower for Olympics, 1 gold medal, 1 bronze medal, and also a couple of world champs. So has, you know, done a hell of a lot in the sports space and then gone on professionally to, you know, use his networks and, you know, further his career. So Duncan will be joining us. Also from QAS, I'd like to thank Mark Knowles, who is the, I'm going to get this wrong, Mark, I think the Senior Personal Development Advisor for QAS, currently completing a Cert 4 in Elite Athlete Wellbeing. Mark is also a 4-time Olympian and a gold medalist. 4 gold medals from Com Games, and Mark, I'm sure you can go into more numerous other accolades, and also as a captain of the Kookaburras team for 4 years. So I just want to welcome both of Duncan and Mark to this, and we're just going to, I think, Nina, try to touch on some of the things that you have already gone through in terms of networking, and as I said, how they actually apply to, you know, you as athletes, while you're still athletes, and also post your athletic career. So the first thing that you actually went through, Nina, I was interested in, particularly like what was the last thing that you did to actually enhance your professional network or to actually increase your networks. Duncan, I'm not sure if you would like to start and just sort of let us know, is that something you're still working on, your networks, and how do you do it, and why do you do it?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, particularly in these times. You know, over the last 6 months during COVID, there's not many networking events that you could actually attend to build your networks, but certainly digitally and online. So through LinkedIn, certainly making sure that everything's, you know, updated there, and you engage in LinkedIn and make new connections and accept new connections. So, you know, certainly that's been going on, but yes, very difficult physically lately, but, you know, there's social media as well. You know, there's still been phones and emails and, you know, Zoom and Teams and things like that. So certainly been building networks still, but just in a different way these days. A little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging, and a little bit more creative at times. But it still doesn't stop you from building the networks. And within my position at work, I've been doing that with industry partners. Even if you don't or haven't met them physically, it's no different whether it be online, digitally, or via email or via Zoom or a Teams meeting, whether it be compared to physically as well. So I've certainly gone out of my way to continue to grow networks, that are important to me.
Yeah. And Mark, I don't know if you want to add to that, but I actually think from my perspective, the last thing I actually did to grow my network was actually add a networking function with you in Canberra back in February or early March. But I'm sure you've probably done something else since then.
I think thanks very much for having me, and Nina, love some of the work you're doing. Naomi, I think the two things that I would touch on is I'm a slightly more recent athlete than Duncan, which is a nice thing to be able to say now that you're retired. I think for the athletes listening, one thing that I'm really proud that I did was when I retired from sport, I sent a thank you email to all of the contacts who I'd kind of met over the time, and nothing specific to them, just saying, thank you for supporting me on my journey. I leave the sport in a time that I absolutely love it. I've got a full-time job at the QAS, and I look forward to staying connected. So I think that was something that I guess I tried to do over a period of my career, was to build that connection. And I think the other one for me now is because I have been lucky enough to even retain some of my sponsors and my ambassadorial roles. After only being retired for 2 years now, I have, and I guess it's really important for the athletes, is there's always something more that you might be able to do. So, for example, my sponsors now, or my partners, get nothing at all out of me playing or running or competing. However, I can still promote them through my kids or, doing things in the community. So I guess there's just continue to try and think of ways that you can influence without actually, winning a race or standing on the dais or something like that. So that would be the two things that I'd say that I've really tried to do. And Duncan touched on it. At the moment, it's very tough. You're not winning anything. You're not competing in anything. You're not on TV for anything. But you can still showcase your life now. For me as a father, my kids playing community sport or healthy and active lifestyles.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things that Nina went through that really resonated with me. One of them was starting networking early. It's not something, I would put myself in the introvert category, and I know Duncan, whether you agree with it or not, also puts himself in the introvert category. It is something that I could have started as an athlete a lot earlier, and it's something that I do, it's a skill, I think, that I've developed over the years, and something that I do a lot better now. But I think that's something that athletes could really be looking on at the moment, starting their networking and that sort of stuff early. Mark, did you start early, or were you someone that was a bit of a late bloomer as well?
Well, I wouldn't class myself as an introvert at all. I'm definitely an extrovert. I like getting out there, speaking to people, connecting with people. I guess the part that I really liked about what Nina said was, and I think probably one of the most important things is it is a learnt skill. Like, you don't just suddenly become good at networking. Even if you're the best athlete in the world when you're 18, 19, 20, it's going to take some time to learn how to connect with people. So I would say that piece around starting small, conversational style rather than asking. I think people, some tips that I would give is certainly to try and work out what others are interested in. So yes, it's a lot about you, but it's also, you need to connect with the people. You need to relate to them before they're going to be willing to connect back or offer you things. So I think those things around starting small, certainly the more that I grew into an elite athlete, through games experience or life experience, it became easier for me. But I think certainly that piece around starting small is so valuable, and that's with your social media and your connections as much as the networking at events.
Yeah. Duncan, you had a really long career, just actually, unfortunately, missed out on 5th Olympics. So we're really in sport and had those opportunities for a long time. Did you start networking early, or is it something that you sort of started a bit later?
Looking back at it, I think I unintentionally started early without realizing it. You're putting yourself in a position where you're meeting people, or, my dad coached me. So whether it's your dad or whether it be, not a relative who coaches you or who is in your support network, they introduce you to people along the way as well. So at the time, you don't think much of it, and particularly as a late teenager kind of thing. The biggest thing I think I wanted to do was leave an impression with everyone that I met. I wanted to come across polite. I wanted to come across likable. I wanted to come across or leave a little message that, hey, I wouldn't mind, connecting with that guy again. So for me, that was very important. And so again, in hindsight, I think it would have been as a teenager I did that. And yes, I was an introvert. I found it very awkward and uncomfortable to go to networking events and introduce myself to people I didn't know. But I think the important thing that I learned from that is that I had to be comfortable in feeling uncomfortable. And what that meant was that even if I felt uncomfortable, I wasn't out of place. Sometimes you feel like you're out of place. Sometimes you feel like everyone's looking at you going, what's he doing? But at the end of the day, that's what people do. They go up and say good day and they share a story. And I like what Knowlesy said in and around, the information that you want to share as well, and not ask for something. That's not what it's about. But it's about connecting and it's about engaging. And you've got to take advantage of situations and events. So if there is an event coming up and you really don't want to go to it, you never know who's going to be there. It could be a next sponsor, a future employer. And I think that's the attitude that I end up having as I went through my career as an athlete. And I'll tell you, it certainly paid off.
Yeah, and look, the other thing that Nina, had said in that space was around networking is a two-way street, and it's something else to give back. And I think athletes already have got a massive advantage in that space because most Australians love sport. They want to hear about sport. They want, your story as an athlete is something that they're already chasing. So the two-way street starts pretty early and easily for elite athletes, I would say. And that's something that's fairly easy to talk about for most athletes. You're fairly comfortable talking about your journey or your goals for most people. Probably just stay, having a chat to you, Duncan, about the hidden market. I don't think that really surprises anyone that 80% of jobs are in the hidden market. That's certainly a number of roles that I've been in over the years have certainly been through networking contacts and have not been positions that have been advertised. That's your experience as well?
Yeah, same for me. So I graduated from Griffith Uni in health science, but at the time leading into the Sydney Olympics, which was my second Olympic Games, Westpac was a sponsor of the Games, and there was an O-Job program that was around back then. And it got offered to me saying, hey, are you interested in banking? And I did kind of health science, but back then it was a little different. And there was a lot of sports management, sports marketing within that degree. And I was like, I always kind of wanted to work for a big Coca-Cola company that sponsors events and have these, ideal dreams in place. And I thought, you know what, I want to get into something and learn new skills. And so I actually applied for a job at a bank. And I'm really glad I did because I learned a real lot. So I started with Westpac for a number of years and then moved over to Bank of Queensland, which again was through networking, and it ended up being in a fantastic position of mobile business lending. And I really, enjoyed that. And then, to be honest with you, the next few jobs after that were all networking as well, or as a result of networking. So it was I'll be completely honest to say this job now at Griffith University, where I've been at for over 8 years, is the first job that I actually applied for and went through the full process of interview and all the rest of it. And I didn't know anyone, so it was actually different going through that process. It was very daunting. I remember sitting in Italy whilst I was on a rowing trip at 5 a.m. and doing the interview over Skype, and it went well. But it was all those previous jobs that actually got me there, and it was the networking that got me those jobs. And so the hidden job market has been 80% of my life.
Mark, you got similar experiences?
Yeah, I do. I won't add too much there because both Nina and Duncan have put it very nicely. The only thing I'll add is that, which I think is something that athletes don't think about enough, is networking also provides this great opportunity to find things that you don't want to do. And someone who quite actually enjoyed that, because I was a little bit lost or unsure of what I wanted to do. And through networking, you gain opportunities. And I think as long as you go in with it, with an open mind on where you might like it to go, where they might like it to go, you actually find out through networking things that you either aren't good at or areas you don't want to move into. And I think that's one thing for athletes, even in the work that we're doing now, is that it's okay to try a number of different things. And I listened to a couple of really great podcasts, and Chris Scott was one of them, the Geelong Cats coach. And I remember it really clearly. Chris Scott said after the Lions won those 3 premierships, he said, I just got offered jobs every single week. And he said, I made this pact that I just didn't want to knock anything back. Because he said, I'd been an AFL footballer with no experience my whole life. And he said, I actually didn't really know what I didn't know. So he said, I just said yes to every opportunity. And he said, I'd work in it for a month, 2 months, 6 months, 12 months. And he'd say, oh, I don't really like that industry. So he tried something else. And in part, that's what athletes aren't good at, this vulnerability piece or letting people down. So that's all I'd say about that market as well.
Mark, you obviously within personal development with QAS are working with a number of elite athletes, including a large number of Griffith athletes, actually. A question, has come through, and I might just encourage anyone that has got specific questions to use that Q&A chat function to send some questions through. As athletes, people are putting so much time into sport, and they might be studying, but it's really difficult to fit in sport and study and work and that sort of thing. How do you find, trying to prove either transferable skills or experience in this space for elite athletes that are then trying to move on with a more professional part of their career?
I think the part for me with transferable skills is that when I was going through, looking for jobs, I think one of the things that I learned that I didn't understand was that you've actually got to show examples of things that you've been able to do. Like anybody can say, like a transferable skill between hockey and the business world is leadership. I suppose I was a leader. I filled the water bottles and did nothing. But I think the part for me when I was applying for roles and speaking to people was actually sharing real stories. So yeah, leadership is a transferable skill, but what did you actually do? Give me some examples of programs that you assisted in. How did you work through challenges? How did you bring a group of people together? So I think transferable skills is one that's absolutely vital, and it's an amazing part of being an athlete for what people might be looking for. But I probably, if I'm honest, I thought just being an elite athlete would be transferable enough. I thought, that will get me something. And what I actually found was that, it helps, but you still have to be able to showcase some of the things that you've done. You can't just talk about being involved in this culture. I was in a high performance team for 15 years and of course all high performance teams have great culture. Well, all of us know that that's not exactly true. So what do you do? What did you do? How did you play a part in the culture? I think for me, that was the part that I didn't understand that I've gotten far better at, is actually trying to relate that to a role that I was looking for.
Yeah, and you know, some of those things as athletes, particularly athletes that come from large team environments, there are some really serious transferable skills there. You know, and one tip I would probably have, having come from probably a similar environment, is actually to make some notes about some of these things, you know, over the years as you're going through, because you forget along the way, you know, some of the leadership roles and you know, some of the goal setting and the things that you have done and led within the team. So, you know, and it's hard to sit back at the end of a 10 or 15-year career or whatever and then remember that finer detail.
I was going to say, Naomi, one of the things that I wasn't sure if you were going to touch it all on being a younger athlete, but one of the things that I wish I would have done is written down more stories. Written down more things of what the team did, the feelings, you know, what happened on tour or in a game or to a teammate, or how did you manipulate a situation or put someone under pressure, because it's actually the stories that are so valuable, you know, when you're either outside of that event or you're retired like I am now. You know, I wish I would have had more stories, or I could have remembered or written down more things that happened on tour, because those things are so powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Duncan, did you have anything to add in that space in terms of transferable skills?
Look, not a lot. I think being an elite athlete, I think Mark kind of explained it pretty well. I think being an elite athlete, and there's a lot of us around the country. Well, I say us, former, but there's a lot of these elite athletes around the country that all show the signs of, you know, reliability and resilience and persistence and, you know, all the rest of it that it takes to be the best that you can be. But unless you can explain, as Knowlesley said, how you, I guess, worked in that space and show examples of how you worked in that space, that's going to set you apart different from other athletes. And I think, you know, networking is one thing, but how you can then set yourself apart from everyone else who is also potentially vying for a sponsor or for a new job, you know, that's got to be thought of as well. So I completely agree with Mark in what he said there about, you know, showing examples of when you showed leadership, etc.
Sure. Just something that I was considering, and it goes back to the introvert extrovert sort of thing. Like, you know, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, networking, you know, as we've said, is a skill and something that you need to work on. Duncan, just in terms of, you know, that skill, what was the part of networking that you had to work on the most? Do you think, to sort of improve and to develop that skill to be something that, you know, you were more comfortable with?
I think there's a few steps to networking. Like, in my mind, putting it very simply, it's number one, getting to these sorts of events or putting yourself in front of people, whether it be digitally or at a physical event. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, you know, engaging people and introducing yourself and building, you know, I guess I won't say connections, because connections kind of move forward, but meeting people, I guess. Then and then there's the I guess the follow up afterwards about staying connected. And I think what I did really well was the follow up. Every time I had a business card, regardless of who it was from, what industry, whether I liked it or not, I'd always, you know, if they give you a business card, you know, that's a sign to, hey, that's potentially a door that could open. So I'd get on the email the next day and say, look, it was great to meet you. And depending on in what context, you know, the event was or the conversation was, then that would kind of lead into, hey, I'd love to catch up for that coffee that you offered, or, you know, whatever it be. Or, you know, look forward to staying connected, and, you know, and then drop a line at another time later on. So I think I was reasonably good at that, but what I was not good at, and I kind of alluded to it earlier on, was, you know, just feeling uncomfortable and awkward. And I think just building the confidence at events is good. And I think it's better to be seen at an event than not go at all. You know, for me, and even today, it's like, well, even if you're not engaging in conversations due to circumstances, it's best to be seen or noticed than not be there at all. So sometimes early on in my career, I'd say no to a few things because I didn't feel like it or I didn't want to or whatever. And I was quite selective. But I think, you've got to be prepared to put yourself out there.
Sure. Yeah. Mark, what about you? Did you have to work on parts of your networking even though you're an extrovert?
Yeah, I did. Duncan touched on it then, but the biggest part for me and Naomi was the follow-up. I'm a great person, I feel, at connecting. I love talking. I love meeting people. I love hearing about them and sharing what I do. But I was really poor at follow-up. And Duncan put it very bluntly then, if someone and that was something that I didn't do very well when I was young. I think as I started, as I said, as you become more comfortable, as you start to understand the importance of it, and you can see the value in of growing your own, but also just this ability to connect and meet different people, I certainly became far better at it. And for me, that group, and I speak to the athletes now a lot, is you should be writing down every single person that you know or you've met. And that's all of your friends and your parents' friends and your friends' friends, every contact at events, at functions, meets. Those people can go into this really nice little database where you can connect regularly. And I think when people think regular, maybe I shouldn't say regularly, but you don't have to connect with those people every week. If you send a little email or a little letter saying, 12 months out before the Olympics or the Paralympics, just want to keep you posted on my journey. At the moment, we're here doing this. Please let me know if you're not interested in hearing anymore, but I'd love to share some of my insights from high performance sport. You could do that twice a year and you'd be amazed how big your connection, your network will grow over a 4-year Olympic Paralympic cycle. And I think for me, that was the part that I didn't understand at the start, was that when you speak to people, it's actually, there is follow-up required. And if anyone's done disc profiling, I'm a middle I, which means that I've got a lot of ideas and I connect well with people, but I have little follow-up, so it fits nicely with my disc profile.
There's just a question in the Q&A there. I'm not sure who wants to answer it, but the question is, what was your experience during the transition with regards to a resume? I don't know whether maybe Mark, you've transitioned a bit, a fair bit more recently than Duncan, whether you would like to answer that?
With regards to a resume, well, I think it depends on things that you've done early on, if that's how I'm reading the question correctly. But I think for me, again, this part around showing on a resume that you are an athlete, I think that's a really positive thing. So don't be afraid to showcase your athlete status. Again, for me, what are other things that you've done? And I think the parts that, if I think about my resume, that I wouldn't have done early on, I think there are parts like community engagement, grassroots sport, junior coaching. I think I was able to put some of those things on my resume as well, because I actually really believe that this part around people and good people is quite important or vital, I think. So don't be afraid to share some of the work, and probably why a lot of us, there's more and more information, there's more and more opportunities for community engagement, for example. So I think even if you haven't worked a lot before or don't have a lot of experience, I would still be putting things like that on a resume. Have I answered that?
Yeah, I think so. And we're actually probably just starting to run out of time. I'm not sure whether there were any other questions that were on the Q&A, but just might wrap up. I want to thank Nina and Careers and Employment for getting involved, and Careers and Employment are going to be doing some more specific webinars for our athletes, and one of them is going to be on transferable skills. But as Nina said, you are able to actually get in contact with Careers and Employment and get some specific individual assistance. So thank you very much for that information. It was really valuable. And to Duncan and to Mark, thank you both for your insights as an athlete, and I'm sure if people had specific questions, you're welcome to send them through to Sports College, and we can certainly chase that up for you. This recording will be available though and we will be putting it up on our Graduate Ready program website, which will be advertising some of the additional support services and webinars that we are some of them are making available, and some of them we're just showcasing or making sure you as elite athletes know that they are actually available through Griffiths. So jump on that website and have a look as well. And if you want to be more involved and want to get our regular emails, please do just get in contact with us at Sports College. But unless anyone else wants to say anything, I'll say thank you very much. Thanks for being involved, athletes that have logged on, and presenters, thanks very much for your time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.